live video. And the live video is starting. And we really have to be live for 3 minutes before it appears anywhere.
Okay.
But people could hear us talking right now. So I'm going to go to Dave, and it's going to say Dave Getchick is live. It's going to say Dave Getchick is live. And Dave Getchick is live. Okay. And I'm going to take this thing right now, and I'm going to share. I'm going to share there, and I'm going to wait for it to go, and I'm going to go here, and I'm going to go share on a friend's timeline. So I'm going to go here, and I'm going to go Jared Smith, and I'm going to post. So this feed is now with Jared Smith. And click to expand. Okay, we are live. I don't know if anybody's watching us at this point.
They may have all given it.
Two people are watching us now. Sheila Costello. Hi, Sheila. How are you? I don't know exactly what we look like, but yeah, we look okay.
We're working on it.
We look okay. Hi. Thank you for inviting me into your teepee and your mud hut in Wisconsin. This is the Puddin'head Press live poetry hour. Today we're going to do a little bit something different. I'm going to have one guest tonight, Jared Smith, the author of Lake Michigan and Other Poems, and the author of When Images Become Imbued with Time, both of which are available from the Puddin'head website, www.puddin'headpress.com or puddin'headpress.net. Hey, Terry, how are you? Terry Jacobus is with us, which is cool. And we're going to be talking about what it takes to make a poet, what it took to make Jared Smith, and he's going to read a bunch of his poetry. And we'll be on for an hour or so with Jared, maybe just a little bit longer. Depends on how tired we get of one another. And then we're going to put on Jared's CD, which I have somewhere. It's not Jared's CD, which is here, which is Controlled by Ghost. We're not going to be showing Controlled by Ghost. We're going to be showing this CD. This CD is 7 minutes before the bombs drop. So after I interview Jared and he reads some of his poetry to us, we are going to, you guys could lay back and go and do your dishes while you listen to the audio CD of 7 minutes before the bombs drop. So I hope you guys enjoy that. And Jared's an ex-Chicagoan. He moved to Denver. He moved to Colorado recently, and but we'll talk about that in a minute. Next Monday, we're going to have another episode of Zooming with the Buddha, and we're actually going to be talking about some copyright law, I hope, and doing some other weird stuff. We don't have a total guest lineup yet. David Buddha Hartgarden's working on that, but that's going to be next week, and the week after that, or the week after that, we're going to have a Bloomsday show. Because every year we have a James Joyce program where we read selections from Bloomsday by James Joyce, which happens on June 11th, June 16th. Now on June 16th, we will be releasing Bloomsday on June 16th, and because that's Bloomsday, and Bloomsday is going to be on the Puddin'head YouTube site and maybe some other sites on YouTube for a week exactly. And then I hope we're going to be showing it on this program. So it's going to be on Facebook Live once. And then it's going to come down. Probably leave it on for 24 hours or so, because Bloomsday is a performance and it's a temporary thing, so we're not going to have it on there very long. So anyways, thanks for listening, everybody. And I want you to hit that little share button and share this with everybody in the world that you can. And right now, without any further ado, with a little bit further ado, because it's but ado about nothing. which is a Shakespearean type term that I'm not sure if it's applicable here or not. But I'm going to bring on the one, the only Mr. Jared Smith.
Well,
Hi, Jared.
whoops.
You should be able to see me now. And
I can see you, Dave. I hope other folks out there can see me, and I sure am. I appreciate your tuning in. I'm proud to be here.
Well,
Pleased to be here.
I think that they could see you, and if I move you over, which way? That way. They could see you even better. And
Okay.
so you're now on Facebook Live. This is
And
Facebook
now
Live.
Well,
I like Facebook.
thank you very much, Dave. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
I like Facebook Live because this is live, and we're going to have this up for a long, long time after this. It doesn't stay up permanently, but it stays up a long time. And then we're going to put you on YouTube to put on YouTube
It's
channel.
important that people know that this is live and that you're saying that, because some people may be wondering, gee, did I get in a little late or something? Well, we have technical issues to fight with, but we got them going now. So we are live, and I hope we will keep you entertained, informed, whatever. Dave, you're the lead on this.
Terry Jacobus is online. He says, Jared, you have a great hat. Okay.
we need hats out here. The sun is brutal.
Can everybody hear us okay out there in Facebook land? Let me know if you can or can't. And hit that little share button so everybody can see this. Anyways, I'm here with a glass of wine with my friend Jared, and we're going to talk about poetry, and we're going to talk about, poets. We're going to talk about what it takes to make a poet, what it takes to destroy a poet, and a little bit about the history of Jared Smith. And I don't think, Jared, that I ever told you about the first time that I met you.
No, but I may have been there.
Well, actually, I don't know if you may not have been there the first time I met you. You were reading for Poets and Patrons.
Okay.
And Poets and Patrons has a yearly contest. Yes, we're clear. They could hear us. Poets and Patrons has a yearly contest, and at the end of the contest, they have people read. They have one person as the reader that reads everybody's poems. And there was a poem by Dave Rubin about a punk rock bouncer, probably at the exit. And I don't know why I saw that poem beforehand. I saw that poem beforehand, maybe because Dave Rubin showed it to me, maybe because Poets and Patrons had given out a list of the poems. I'm not sure, but I'm like, this guy could never read this poem. This old guy with a hat and a mustache could never read this poem. And sure enough, he comes to the poem and he does this great job. However, you weren't doing the poem as Dave Rubin would have done it. You stylized the poem to your own poem, and not a lot of poets could do that. Okay, Esteban Colon is one poet that could do that, but you took Dave Rubin's poem and changed it into a Jared Smith poem, kind of like Frank Sinatra would do with a poem. Okay, I mean it was this magical thing. So I don't know if I first.
Well, I mean that was a good poem that Dave had there. And I think this was while I was president of Poets and Patrons.
It was. How long were you president of Poets and Patrons for?
I'm not sure. Probably 5 or 6 years, up until I left for Colorado.
Okay, that was a long time.
Yeah.
That might have been the first time that I met you, or the first time I met you might have been through this thing here.
Walking the Perimeters of the Plate Glass Window Factory.
This is a book called Walking the Perimeters of the Plate Glass Window Factory. And it's actually It's actually a great book, and one of my favorite poets in my poetic development period, let's call it, was a poet called David Ignatow, who wrote this book, Rescue the Dead. And
Uh-huh.
David Ignatow had this poem called "Get the Gasworks into a Poem." I don't know if you ever read that poem, but it reminded me so much of Jared Smith's work in the Plate Glass Window Factory. Reminded me so much of David Ignatow's work, um, and that's why I took more of a notice of Jared Smith. But I don't know, my introduction to you was through Poets and Patrons, or my introduction to you was through that on the paper. Do you remember that poem, Get the Gasworks into a Poem?
I do. I do.
And it goes like
Uh,
this. It goes like this. I have it here. I have it in David
what a
Ignatow's book.
surprise.
This is what reminded me, Jared Smith reminded me of this poem called Get the Gasworks by Jared, but this is by David Ignatow. Jared Smith's work reminded me of that. Get the Gasworks into a poem. And, oops, hold on. Okay, now I'm not going to have more light here. Get the gasworks in a poem. And you've got the smoke and smokestacks, that mottled red and yellow tenements, the grimy kids who curse with the pungency of the color of gas. You've got America, boy. Sketch the river, the barges, all dirty and slimy. How do the seagulls stay so white and always cawing like little mad geniuses? You've got the kind of being that makes the kind of thinking we do. Gaswork, smokestack, whistle tooting, wisecracks. They don't come because we like it that way, but because we find it outside our window every morning as soot on the furniture, and trucks carrying coal for gas, and kid hot after the ball under the after school under the wheel. He gets it in the belly straight. He lies there. So the kids keep tossing the ball around after the funeral, and the cops keep chasing them. To the mammies keep hollering, and Papa's flings his newspaper outward in disgust with discipline. That reminded me of Jared Smith.
Well, I think that, he had a strong impact on me.
Okay.
He writes poems, or he wrote poems that dealt with the essential dignity and strength of human beings, no matter what they did. And this was particularly evident in people who were out there working in the factories and being responsible for making their own livings, not the crew who inherited things. I will read you the title poem from that book, and maybe people will see the connection there.
Okay.
This was Walking the Perimeters. Low buildings gleam in sundown, igniting the green grass strip along cement walkways, centering Job's presence as he walks the perimeters, and he curses to himself until in the metronome of his footsteps he begins to breathe. A dry leaf blows down before his face. It swirls. A pigeon banks left and then right above the quadrangle. Between these two he finds perspective, space to turn, and watches from after the suits draw by. The perimeters stand. The night within has windows, and each window ignites laboratory tubes, faces before computer windows, bottles of chemicals, timesheets, and arias from forgotten tongues, labyrinthine sculptures charting the stars, measuring the rhyme of ancient mariners beneath a cold winter that hides beneath the laughter of wind-up dolls tottering to someone's beat. like a field in Nebraska seen from 30,000 feet, green golden with corn watered from far below the earth, from far down where the darkness wells up to meet sun, and the gray beyond the Ogallala aquifer impounds that field, and the perimeters spin away before Job's eyes, leaving petite parks and benches and red summer skirts too small and light to see, leaving the squat bone columns alone, staring back at that great outside.
And that's what really made me, poems like that really made me notice Jared Smith in the early days, and just the variety of work that you have, and the your ability to write good, consistent work like that on a continuous basis. I mean, I've written some poems that were pretty decent, but I can't write one every 6 months like Jared Smith can.
Well, writing for me was something I had to do to try to understand the world around me better. I started writing. Well, I thought it would be great to be a poet back when I was 8 years old, because I started reading the works of A.E. Housman and Robert Frost, and I realized that these people thought with more depth about the world around them than you hear in the media commentators on the news, for example. And then as I got older, I got to meet Galway Cannell. I got to talk with him, and then after college, I was on the editorial staff of the New York Quarterly, and I got to know Charles Bukowski and Allen Ginsberg and Robert Bly and Diane Wachowski and Anne Sexton, and I realized that yes, these people felt life very deeply. They thought about it a lot, and I wanted to be able to talk to them. I wanted to be able to be somebody who could enter into a conversation with them. And the only way to do that was to learn to think like a poet. And all the stuff they teach you in crafts in college and whatnot, when they teach you about iambic pentameters and sonnets and all that, that's important. But what is most important is learning to think slowly and in depth about things. The craft is important. You use the craft in polishing it up after you've written it.
Do you think that a poet thinks differently than other creatives? Does a poet think differently than a suspense writer? Does a poet think differently than a painter or a knitter?
I think, well, there's going to be a lot of variation among them. I think, in one sense, certainly a poet does, because a poet has to work solely with words. He has to create mood through the sound and the creation of vision through words on paper. On the other hand, the creative process itself is very similar, because I think in all of these creative arts, the painter or the musician or the poet has to reflect slowly upon the world about him or her. Perhaps the best example I can think of that would cover all of these things is a photographer.
Okay.
If a photographer takes a traditional snapshot photo, you get an immediate high contrast black and white or color photo, which doesn't tell you very much. If the photographer uses a slow shot with a slow lens, the slower the lens is, the more detail you will get in the picture. The light will show much more in the depth of the face of the person or in the background, and that goes. The parallel with poetry is that poetry is a slow way of thinking. The impressions come at you fast, and you jot them down fast, but then you have to slow down and get a feeling for what those impressions mean to your vision. Your vision is what you develop over a lifetime.
So maybe a little bit more like a painter processing those images.
Yeah. And like a painter who's working on a painting will usually do it in several different times of day or with different lightings.
Mm-hmm.
Or they will work on the same painting at the same time of day for a number of days, so that the light is very important. It's going to bring out what is important to them about that place or that time.
And just like a painter, a painter might go with different layers, and so does a poet.
That's right. That's a very good point. A good poem. I think one shouldn't say that. Poetry tries to capture not only what something is in this instant, and so immediately that one can feel it, but also the poet tries to place that feeling within time or within a space that people can recognize and can bring back into their own lives.
Like Ignato getting the gasworks into a poem,
right?
Like Jared
bringing the ugliness of the factory and of production into the beauty of the poem.
You know, I've always, and this is one of a huge common ground that you and I have, the dignity of the working man, okay, yeah. And the dignity of the person that creates the environment for that working man too.
Well, I think and I think one reason we have that, David, is that we're both working men.
Yeah, yeah.
And you know, I have a very thorough education in poetry. I majored in literature and in philosophy, and I got my graduate degree in American poetry.
Where did you go? Okay, where were you born?
I was born in Cleveland.
You were born in Cleveland, okay.
But I grew up in White Plains, New York, and went to college at St. John's College in Santa Fe for the first 2 years.
So you were out west already in college. Wow.
Yeah. But that was basically to study philosophy. Mm-hmm. That's called the Great Book School, and you start out by translating Aristotle and Homer and whatnot from the Greek.
Okay.
And the New Testament. And I did that for a year and a half, and then I went down the road. I hitchhiked around the country. I worked odd jobs. And finally made enough money selling encyclopedias out in California that I was able to go back to New York, where I went to New York University and studied with some Robert Hazel, who was he was a librarian of Congress for the it's kind of what the U.S. Poet Laureate is now, but they didn't have those then. And then I met Bill Packard, who was the head of the New York Quarterly, and as I mentioned earlier, through the New York Quarterly, I got to know Robert Bly and James Dickey's work and many others. That's where I got my real training in the craft of poetry.
Do you feel like you at one time did you emulate somebody or really delve into the work of one or several writers or a school of writing?
Oh yes, oh yes,
What?
many of them.
Okay.
Uh, uh, as I've mentioned early on, Galway Canal fascinated me early on, and I got to be very familiar with his work from when his first book uh, came out in 1962, and after him, I got to corresponding for years with Robert Bly, and we would argue about poetry and through letters with each other. Then I met Gregory Corso, and one of the beat poets, and that I really got along well with Corso. We were drinking buddies, and I got to know the other beats through him, Allen Ginsberg and so forth. They so I studied the beat poetry a lot.
Mm-hmm.
W.S. Merwin was somebody I spent a lot of time studying, and I corresponded some with him. Also, some of the older poets. Drawing a blank right now. There have been so many.
But
But
there was so it was a wide variety. You graduated with the degree from New York colleges with a degree in philosophy.
New York University. New York University.
With a degree in philosophy?
No, I left. I studied philosophy more in St. John's College. In New York University, I studied American literature, and then my graduate work at New York University, where I got my master's, was in American poetry.
Okay.
And of course, Walt Whitman was huge. I studied Whitman very hard. I also was very interested in the Nibelungenlied, which was an early Germanic epic where the poet at that early age seemed to deal with the separation of logic and military power and magic, all in the governing of a country.
Mm-hmm.
He had dragons and everything else, but
I read through it. I like dragons and monsters and stuff. It attracted me as a youngster.
Yeah.
But
anyway, I found that all these people they had different styles of writing, and I found that every moment in life has its own style of writing you want to call on if you're going to capture that moment for people you're trying to explain it to, or people who are listening to it.
You know, one of the things I've been thinking a lot about lately is what a poet's supposed to be doing. When I was younger, I read a story by Ray Bradbury. I don't know if it was in Penthouse or if it was in Playboy, called The Toynbee Convector, and it talked about went through a time machine, and it talked about Edward Toynbee, the historian. And Toynbee talked about the creative minority moving the uncreative majority. And I always felt that one of the jobs of a poet was to somehow communicate their feelings and ideas to a society and to others. I really don't think in terms of society normally. Other people, other individuals, their beliefs, their ideas, their language. And I always felt that it was essential for a poet not to be self-indulgent and to be able to communicate their ideas to others.
I think that's true and I would carry it a bit further too. I think we do have that. Uh, this is something we have to do, but we also are teaching people, as we are teaching ourselves, to think beyond the everyday language that we conduct our lives in. We're trying to teach people the creative language so that they can create too, and they can give their words and their insights back to us once they learn how to open up and find themselves.
Mm-hmm.
That's why one of the reasons that if you're going to be serious about writing poetry, you have to read as much as you can. You want to read as much poetry as you can. You want to read as much prose as you can. And you want to learn to be a critic of that. Learn to write reviews of other poets' work, because that teaches you an attention to detail which you can use for yourself and bring back to the society. The fact that we have, you and I, Dave, or any other poet, has an idea of what society should be like or what is important in a creative sense, it's important to us. It forms our work. It provides the voice of our work, but it may be wrong. It may be that we are biased in ways we don't understand.
Yes.
And that's why we want other poets to come back at us, to be part of the conversation. It's because culture is built out of many people talking creatively and from the heart, rather than one or two people talking and everyone listening to them. But what's different about what a poet does, whether it's a new poet or an old timer, what's different about the way they talk is that they have learned how to unlock themselves and what's inside them. Whereas most people that we run into on the street each day have a very limited vocabulary that they use in day-to-day communications. Most of what we say is dedicated toward what can I buy from you today? Mm-hmm. How much will it cost? How would you like me to do this for you? It ignores things like, how do you feel? Really?
What do you think?
And it ignores love. It doesn't even ask what love is. It's not in-depth communication, and poets try to work with in-depth communication.
You've talked before about how a poet changes over his lifetime, and what he wants out of poetry and what he wants to do with poetry changes.
Oh yeah.
I've run into a lot of younger poets, especially, who say, "I don't want to read anybody else because it'll pollute my poetry and it won't be mine anymore."
Well, life pollutes us, when you start out, when you're a young man or a young woman, it's like, it's a good way to meet people. I used to think, boy, it's a great way to pick up girls in a bar. I could tell them I'm going to read it for them. And it worked. But as you get older and you discover more and more complex issues that you and your friends and your family have to deal with, then you begin to realize that you have to learn more. You have to learn what others have done in similar situations, what the great thinkers have thought, what the creative thinkers have thought, and learn from them what you can, and bring into yourself what you find of value there. So that what I wrote back in the 1970s, in the beginning of my collected works, was totally different than what I'm writing today.
Mm-hmm.
I've got a poem here, which I will share with you,
Which poem?
which maybe deals with this, because it's a very recent poem. There is a song in all poetry. There is a song in my poetry. Every line, every stanza, every poem, each poem an open aria into another. And they change one to the next, and 1 year to the next they change. One book becomes another, and each book becomes another song. The song of workers and looms and chains and sweat and heartbreak. But there is always the song. There is always the love, the sweet whisper of sun on mountain meadows, the deer pausing to drink at the stream, and the stream with its magenta flowers finding its way among dark stones that hold the night tight in their sides. And it is always so in each poem we write. Whether there is a song that sings of us and of our homes and lives, there is a song that keeps us going, a song that has filled our literature and we have raised our institutions with, and that we sing to our children each night. It changes through the years, but is there. I have not found how to write this song for the cold waves that rise around our ankles, for the kind of sands that wrap about our feet now, at this time and in this dark place, but I will do so. Already I can hear the murmur of others learning how.
Wow.
It's, if you go back to my earlier work like you did in Walking the Perimeters, and if you go way back to the 1970s, you'll find I was always concerned with the man on the street, the guy who works hard, who sweats, who has to take care of his family. But and that's part of my vision, but that has filled out over the years. And what I say about it now is much different than what I said then. And that's why the poetry changes, even though the vision doesn't.
So this book,
yeah,
Song of the Blood, with this picture of you on the back of it.
As I say, I look different inside and out.
That's a different man than I don't have an older picture of you. But this book is different than those other books.
Yes, yes, it is.
I love the title poem of Grace Grow Bigger Between Generations too. And
yes.
and can you tell us at least the concept of the title poem?
Oh, absolutely. The graves grow bigger between generations. The concept is that we think we know what we're doing when we start out in life, or we think there's a job we have to do. Maybe it's that we have to build a dam over a river, like the guy in this book does. Or maybe it's that we have to raise a family. We have to send our son or daughter to school or something. Or maybe it's that we're part of a car assembly line and we're building cars all the day. But there is something beyond what we're doing that we never realize in our lifetime. We play a role in society which is beyond that. So that in this poem, The Graves Grow Bigger Between Generations, it starts out with a working man building a dam across the Allegheny River in Erie, Pennsylvania, and he's sweating and cursing because he sees Carnegie's train go by with all his fancy money and all the wealth he's bought himself, and he really hates people who have that kind of wealth. And so he gets to drinking hard and working hard. He falls off the dam. He dies, falls off the dam, and becomes part of something bigger because his body becomes part of the dam, which pumps the valley, which creates electric power all over the country through the TVA system. And his son eventually is working on that dam, and he goes there and he gets run over by a steamroller that's working on paving the roads. And the road becomes even bigger than the dam, and it covers all of America. And in the backyards of libraries, or in the backyards of the towns all across America, are Carnegie libraries, where people are suddenly sharing the words of those generations and the understandings or misunderstandings of that time because of Carnegie, who started out as the ultra villain and yet caused the education of America.
Yeah, I mean, it brings in so much, and it's like a saga of a family that I thought was great. Give us another poem, and I'm gonna do something here on. Everybody notices my head keeps on going like this. Okay, that's because,
I thought it was loose.
Have you seen that? No, not a bobblehead. Okay, that's because I'm watching Jared on one computer here. Okay, and I'm watching the Facebook feed on another computer here, and the camera is in the middle of here, and Jared is watching me from right there, and you're watching me from right there, so there's all these...
Let me give you
Give me another poem, and I'm going to do something here.
Okay, this, folks, if you can see it, is from my most recent book called That's How It Is. This is the title poem from that. And this is available on Amazon, as are all the other books. But that's how it is. Sunrise finds the New York shopkeepers rolling up their windows, dusting off the counters, sweeping the floors, shoveling their walkways, pulling pastries from dry, hot ovens, filling coffee pots to get the morning going for the secretaries and executives and lawyers, bankers, insurance salesmen, clerks, and the homeless too, coming in quietly with their handfuls of fear and empty bellies, because it's another day and the workers do what workers do every blessed day, not too aware of what they do or whom they serve, but it's morning and they rise. And sunrise is indifferent as the clouds and passes on to Pennsylvania, and it reflects redness off the empty steel mills and foundries, where again the shopkeepers rise and here the miners line up for unemployment, or the lucky ones still go down into the darkness of the earth with fear in their hearts, and fishermen line up on the banks of the Allegheny with their thermoses, and a gum-chewing girl from a diner clears egg-smeared plates from tables, watching the traffic that never ends go by along the interstate, a seamless zipper. and sunrise hurries on its way across the freighters on Lake Michigan, and the commodity traders working screaming toward heart attacks in Chicago, the endowed institutions of learning that line our cities, the students half asleep, out over the heartland where the grain still grows so high it never touches the ground, and on out over eastern and then western Kansas where the aquifers are drying and the promise of America's breadbasket is starting to grow thin. It moves on across the mountains of Colorado, hiding itself in valleys and pointing out the oil wells and ore dumps and abandoned ghost towns, the rusting scaffolding of the Rhone Plateau, the toxic sumps of Climax, and the shopkeepers rising to open their shops for the clerks and lawyers, ranchers driving their herds to the high country or to the low country, depending on the season. It changes, but sunrise moves across it, and as always work begins, goes growing, and of how the same work has to start and be filled each day, or of the darkness that follows only hours behind, and the light behind that, the tired muscles in a man's arms, the panic of the morning table when the bills come out, the liquor sparkling in taverns after the day is gone, shimmering to the fields of evening gowns, but it moves on without reference to the thoughts of workers. Sunrise brightens up the sands of Vegas and the roulette tables, the hookers, high rollers, and papers in the gutters along the strip, the hangovers and empty wallets left over from the night before, and the shop owners, the police, the judges putting on their pants, the hotel windows glinting back a desert sandscape to the sky. But it moves on and peaks upon the Hollywood sign and the cougar living there in those hills and the movie makers making reality, and flattens out over the iron endless gray of the Pacific. But even as the surf is up off California, it is growing darker to the east, and the day is as long as the emotions we all go through.
I don't know whether I'm supposed to clap at these things or not. I should okay, great poem.
This is as I say, it's from That's How It Is. That's my most recent book. It's from Stubborn Mule Press.
What's the cover price?
Beats the hell out of me.
Okay, you could just look
it's $15. $15.
Look on Amazon for That's How It Is. And,
yes.
And type in That's How It Is by Jared Smith. You might be able to find it on Aid Books or something like that also. And
right.
And if you look for Lake Michigan and other poems, and where images become imbued with time are available on the Puddin'head Press website, puddin'headpress.com, puddin'headpress.net. Either one will work. And take a look at. There's some sample poems there from the two books that you could have also. So, Jared, how many books do you have now?
14 books.
Wow.
14.
Do you think 14 books is a lot for a poet or a little for a poet? I mean, I don't know how many books William Carlos Williams had. I don't know how many books.
It's a fair number of books. There are poets who have many more, like A.D. Winans, who's a good friend. Many poets have published. Many poets own presses, and they publish their own work as well as my work has always been published by other people.
There's some poets that will publish 30 books by themselves. Now you're up for the Colorado Writers Guild Award.
Colorado Authors League.
Colorado Authors League.
Finalist there.
So in the next couple of months, we're going to know whether you win that or not.
I'll know on next Sunday.
Wow, that's pretty quick. Let me know, and I'll do some promotion for it.
Okay.
You you've had a really good career getting published in magazines and getting
Yeah.
books published,
Yeah.
and but you have a deep resonant voice that I'm gonna start copying soon for my radio Facebook voice. How did you like purposely develop a poetry reading technique, or is that just something that comes natural?
It comes natural. What happens when I read a poem is uh, I enter the time it was written in, and I'm reliving it, and uh, that keeps it exciting, I guess. But that's my real voice. I did practice listening to Dylan Thomas when I was younger,
Okay.
but I just that's it. That's a false reading voice. It would be false for me.
Mm-hmm.
It's just when I get excited about things, I have a deep voice, and but poetry does have a music. The poem I just read, where I say every poem is a song. That's one of the things that separates poetry from prose. There are many things, but one thing is that poetry has a song which can be described by the meter length or rhymes or lack of rhymes, that sort of thing. But really, it's a song that matches the moment you're writing about. Poetry has to be organic poetry. It has to sound like what you're writing about, and it's melodic.
So
One thing poets do is they listen a lot, and they listen to the music of the machinery and the people that work with the machinery, and the structures people build around them. They all have a sound.
one thing that you're very specific about is the length and the shape of the lines in your work. You do a lot
Yeah.
of you do a lot of longer poems, and your lines tend to be like 150 characters long for each line. Uh,
This is said by a man who had the problem of trying to
yeah.
fit Lake Michigan into a book with poem.
The
That,
original
that,
title of
that poem, you did a good job with that book, by the way. It was adapted to being a musical and a play that was produced in Chicago off Broadway.
so,
But
somebody just made a comment that when I try to do a Jared Smith invitation, I sound like a muppet. And I'm not sure that guy knows that at one time I was actually part of a puppetry troupe by Kathleen Schandelmeyer.
oh, beach poets.
Yeah,
Kathleen,
but when you're like this with a puppet with your hand up in the air for like a half an hour, with that silly voice, it gets pretty bad after a while. But give us another poem.
Okay. How about another one from? Oh, I'll give you
Well,
another.
no, Lake Michigan and Other Poems. The original title of Lake Michigan and Other Poems was No Natural Outlet, because Lake Michigan has no natural outlet. There's rivers going into it, but it flows up through Lake Superior. And they built the Chicago River as an unnatural outlet. And the original concept of Lake Michigan and Other Poems was to have a really claustrophobic book that no natural outlet. We can't escape this book, but I really couldn't fit the length of the lines in there properly, and
Well, but
the because I did a larger format book, the lines sweep out and they sweep back and forth like it's waves coming through. I mean, it's really
Whitman influence.
it's lines worthy of the length of Whitman. Give,
There is one thing about that poem, though. Lake Michigan had no natural outlet. That's true. No rivers flowing out of it. But it did have one outlet. And this was key to the poem. Every man, woman, and child, every animal, every piece of vegetation within 100 miles of the lake shore has Lake Michigan within themselves, because that's the source of water in that part of the country.
and you talked about how Lake Michigan is part of us all because of that. I mean,
That's right.
there's just those ideas and that stuff that goes into your work that you know is admirable.
Well, here's another one which I just published in. Actually, I'm a poetry editor of Turtle Island, Turtle Island Quarterly, which is an e-zine out of Oregon. If you want to look it up, folks. But this is a poem I just put in it, which I wrote. A boy on a long dirt road. It is the time darkness rises from the earth, wades through the leaves of fescue grass, dapples the dandelions growing wild, and filters through magenta tulips, climbs stealthily the deep furrows lining the trunks of cottonwoods, wrapping their towering crowns that pull back into the wind of summer. A boy walks along a dirt road that rises up as dusty clouds about his feet at each step, and it too is dark and growing deeper. There is probably a well-lit house just beyond the next hill, the next turn, but light no longer reaches here. The boy may stumble over a small rock or catch his toe upon a broken root, but he keeps on. There is no turning back. And this is when the darkness finds voice, as rosy finches return to their nests, and deer move along their hidden paths, and an owl somewhere begins its search. This is where he pauses at last to listen, aware of how the night sees him, of the eyes that glisten from above. And it is now he fills his lungs with the air and light of evening, and his step resumes, and the hill that rose before him is crested, and the moon comes out, and there is no well-lit house, no home waiting beyond the bend, beyond what he will build somehow.
Wow. There's sometimes in your poetry there's this hint that there's more to the story, including at the end of that poem.
Yeah, there should always be more. Poems shouldn't end. They should haunt you.
Say hello to Wilda Morris. I think she's still watching us.
Hey, Wilda.
And
Frank, know you're there.
Frank Jarrett and Jeffrey Helgeson's watching us.
Oh, hi guys.
I hope Hugh Schwartzberg is still on the line watching us, because I haven't seen him in a long time.
Yeah.
So we got some friends out there in the audience, and Leonard's out there, the Count's out there.
Oh, good. I hope
nice.
Sandra Blake is checked back in.
I don't.
A couple other Fran Burst maybe.
I can't see who's online, but this is posted to your Facebook page too.
Well, I had a lot of good friends, and I appreciate your being here.
So if anybody goes to my page or the Jared Smith page on Facebook, or they stumble over us, and Leonard's still with us. Leonard's saying stuff in French. I never understand half the stuff that Leonard says, because he makes these J Swiss EC something like you see me or something like that. I don't know. It's this is a different kind of media, because it's hard to reply to what people are saying online and pay attention to the whole rest of the world.
Well, and of course I don't have the controls Dave does, so I don't see who's online or what they're saying. But
Leonard said I am here. That's Leonard translated for us.
Oh.
But no, I really have no control. This is like a Wild West kind of a poetry thing nowadays.
The way it ought to be.
But yeah, I mean, I like the artistic elements of
Hmm.
some of the stuff that I wind up doing.
Yes.
And it's like you could build stuff. And
Yeah.
and Jared Smith, you used to do a lot of work with the gas industry.
Yes.
You worked
Yes.
at Argonne for a
Yes.
couple years.
Argonne National Laboratory, right?
Uh, and,
Yeah.
and, and,
I.
and Hugh Schwartzberg is still with us. Hi, Hugh. Hi, Hugh.
Hello, Hugh. I don't know if you remember me, but I remember you. We met a couple of times.
He said he's confirming that he's listening.
Ah.
Anybody out? I'm looking at the Facebook feed here on my left, and Jared's here on my right. Anybody have any questions for Jared? Because I'm going to make him read another poem or two, and then I'm going to put on his CD. Because we really can't do this all night. So anybody have a comment for Jared or a question for Jared? Jared used to live out in Lisle, I believe.
Yeah.
And and right now you're out in Boulder, near Boulder.
Well, in Lafayette, which is right outside Boulder. Yeah.
Okay, and like I said, we got people listening, but I don't see any questions from anybody.
Okay. Let me then close with one quick set of comments, and I'll read a poem, and then you can take it away.
And I want one more thing for you. I want advice to a young poet.
Advice to a young poet.
Give me some advice for a teenage poet, and then do your thing.
Okay. Advice to young poets: read a lot of anthologies of poetry. Find what kind of poets appeal to you in the anthologies, and then buy more of their books. Read magazines for variety. Not enough poets read, and not enough young poets. If you don't read, you're pretty much going to be talking about your love life as a young poet, and that's pretty exciting. I know that. I did that myself. It was pretty exciting. But it's if you're trying to expand your audience and get published, you've got to say something other than about yourself. And you learn how to say things about things other than yourself from reading other people. Think about the larger world, not just about yourself. Be passionate. Write every day if you're a young poet. Sit down and bang away for a couple hours. As you get older, you will write less often. Write reviews of other people's work. You can always publish a review of a book of poetry, and people will thank you for writing a review about your book, and they'll be happy to publish you. That's a way to get people to read you. It also sharpens your analytical skills. It makes you more aware of line length and breaks and iambic, pentameter or sestinas, sonnets and so forth, of the form of the poet. And it makes you aware of the vision the poet is working with. And by vision, I mean the philosophy that is hidden in the work of that poet. Almost every poet who's written any number of years has a philosophy of life which is contained or echoed in their work. In mine, it's a belief in the human dignity of everyone, particularly working people. I'd say when you write something and you think it's great, put it aside for a few days. Put it aside for a week. Come back to it and see if it still makes sense. Then go to open mic readings. Like Dave does a lot of open mic readings he hosts. Read it in front of an audience and see if people understand what you're talking about. If they don't, you didn't communicate. Mm-hmm. And part of poetry is you have to communicate what you're trying to. That's a kind of control that you learn, and that goes along with other elements of craft. I want to stress how important studying of craft is. You study craft when you sit at the knees of another poet and they talk with you about how to write. You study craft at Iowa Writing School or any university that has a creative writing program. They teach you craft. That will get you so far. That will get you where you can publish in on the little magazines. But where you want to go is way beyond that. You want to go into your own vision, and you want that vision to be powerful. And one of the ways to do that is live powerfully, do many different things, and do them passionately so that you can understand other people who do them and so that you can talk with them about it and they'll believe you because you speak with experience. That will show up in your work.
I've decided I'm an adventurer.
Let me read another
But
poem.
no, we have 2 questions for you.
Oh, okay.
The first question is, did you know Ed Dorn, who taught at the U of C in Boulder?
Yes.
What
I did not know him personally. I knew his work. We corresponded some.
Okay. And there's other question is, how do you edit your work with the discipline of getting rid of lines you love if they don't fit the voice of your poem?
If you love a line and it doesn't fit the voice of your poem, take it out, put it aside, and chances are you're working on 2 poems or more poems. And you'll find out the next day you'll be thinking about that line and another line will pop into your head that goes with it and it will kind of take off. Very often you'll be writing 2 or 3 poems at once in your head. And they'll be clearer to you and to others if you separate them. On the other hand, it may turn out that there are lines missing, so that you have to put in some new lines, and you get one longer poem.
I find that with fiction, when I go and I work on something and I'm stuck, I put it on the side, I come back, and I'm writing in a totally different style.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now with a poem, it's short. It's a shorter work generally, so you have a shorter period of time that you're writing it in. But with fiction,
it can, but it will find its own work. Lake Michigan took 1.5 years to write.
And Song of the Blood, you took a long time to write too, didn't you?
Song of the Blood took about 3 years.
You talked about bleeding when you were doing that.
Yes.
You were emotionally bleeding with it. Give us another poem. Or what else do you have to say?
Let me just read one more one here. This is again from That's How It Is. This is the American dream, and what of Joe? Big Joe hauls the groceries in from the back seat of a beat-up Dodge each week, with never one sick week in his life, but he sits at a desk 6 days of 7, turning numbers, 40 years after romantic poetry at Harvard and teaching linguistics at Charlotte and UIC. And he remembers the phyla of each green flower he sees in his memory as he walks the fields. In memory, it is getting harder to breathe, and he stops to catch his breath again and again. With each week, he is immortal until he dies. This is the American dream. And where are all the professors? What magic do they breathe into their lungs? Where capitalism fills the desert canyons? Surely it is something potent, powerful, and invisible as the oxygen that fills our lungs, and the starlight that fills the night lights their pipes. This is the American dream. And what of Joe and all his studies, degrees, and hours now gone? In other words, learn all you can in the universities, guys, or in the schools, whatever you can. Always learn, but don't stop. Live passionately.
I still remember climbing that mountain with you up to the gold mine.
Yes,
and,
yes.
And I still remember that moose that we saw.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
I still remember when we stopped at the gold mine and we overlooked the gold mining operation and the extraction houses that they have where they're extracting the gold out. And you said,
Yeah.
look on the ground, and you pointed to the ground, and there was this little tiny flake of gold, and it was about
Yeah.
that big. And you said, you better take that. And I still have that. I still have that little tiny piece of gold. I took it and I taped it into a notebook.
There you
So
go.
so I have the mountain of gold I found with Jared Smith that one time. But you're right about that adventure thing. I mean, life isn't it? Okay, that's what my poem "The Elephants" is about.
Uh-huh.
And the Elephants is about taking that life experience because that life experience is not enough.
That's right.
Because I know people that have these great life experiences, but they can't communicate it with. Can't
Yeah.
communicate it, and taking those life experiences and putting it into a work of art is something
That's
that I
right.
call the elephants. And
Yeah.
and
Well, it's like the painter has to learn how to hold the paintbrush, what pigments to use. The writer has to learn how to use the words. Michelangelo had to learn how to chip the marble.
mm-hmm.
Uh, those are the tools. But the vision comes from the passion.
Yeah, yeah.
And actually, the vision is more important. It's much more important than the craft. The craft is just to deliver that package to the people you want to talk to.
Well, the craft is easy. I mean, I've seen people do crafts. I mean, craft is craft. Craft is not art.
Right.
Okay, you need craft to make art, but it's a different thing. But there's a spark that you need to have to be able to turn those experiences into art.
That's
And
right.
without that spark, without that thing, there was a poet, Danny Solis. He had a poem, "The Other Thing." No, I don't want this. I don't want that. I want the other thing. I want the other thing that got his claws into Van Gogh and would never let go.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
that beast that grabs onto a productive creative writer is
And shakes the hell out of them. And people don't think that you work hard when you're writing poetry or painting or any of the other arts. Boy, you work hard and it tears your guts out emotionally most of the time.
I mean
Uh,
you work a lot harder than I do because you produce so much more than I do. You must sweat a lot.
yeah, I do.
What do you think the hardest part is? I mean, is it getting in touch with yourself or communicating it?
I think it's both. And I think that when you're younger, the hardest part is getting in touch with yourself. And you have to perform all sorts of rituals to do it. You have to sit down and pound out a couple hours a day. Or Robert Bly used to tell me when I was younger and starting out, he'd say, put your typewriter on a serape, a Mexican serape, and light candles around the corners of it. And that will invoke the daemon that will come in and help you write. And I said, you really believe that crap? And he said, hey, if it works, and it does, because you're creating a ritual that shifts your mind into another place. Well, after you've been doing it for a number of years, you can shift your mind much more easily. And you can break into writing a poem in the middle of a conversation or listening to something, and you try to store enough of it in your mind that you can jot it down when you get a few minutes.
But there's certain places in the world that I could go to that inspire me to write.
Yeah.
And one of them is the balcony behind the field house, or whatever you want to call it, at Starved Rock. You're on a balcony,
Mm-hmm.
you're overlooking the Illinois River, and if I am ever stuck, I go there and I just write for hours. I get lost in it.
Yes. Yeah.
John Dixon called it a mania for words.
Mm-hmm.
And in some places, I get this. It helps me to get this mania for words.
Yeah.
And, I remember there was a John Dixon poem. There's my buddy John Dixon is behind me over here.
John Dixon is a great fellow.
he
Great fellow.
he had a poem called Ritual, and he said you had to sacrifice a young poem, and you had to burn it in a brazier. Okay, and that was one of those rituals to
Yeah, you have to have a ritual. And then as that's very important. As you get older, you become able to enter that writing trance-like state more easily. Writing it comes from we haven't talked about this at all, but it comes from a trance-like state where you're not thinking in a linear fashion. You're not thinking A leads to B, leads to C, leads to D, but you're working with non-parallel thought, non-linear thought.
Sheila Donovan just said that she writes poems in her sleep.
Yeah, very much. Writing poetry is even when you're awake. It's almost in a sleep-like thought process often, and you'll find that examples of that particularly in Robert Bly's work and W.S. Merwin's work. They're kind of images that don't quite go together, but they go together from a feeling sense.
Mm-hmm. Ashbury was big on that.
Yeah.
It's like, so where do you come from this word? Where do you come up with this word?
Yeah. And there's a bit of automatic writing that goes into, the Beats used to talk about automatic writing, and they thought it was a big thing. It wasn't really. Robert Burns wrote nonlinear poetry way back in the 1800s, and you would see it, the nonlinear quality in Robert Burns' work between stanzas.
Mm-hmm.
Not between lines, but very advanced.
But I got to toast Leonard really quick. Thanks for watching, Leonard.
Yes.
Any last words or a last poem before I put on your CD? What do you want to say about 7 minutes before the bombs drop?
Well, 7 minutes before the bombs drop, the title poem was part of the Poets Against the War effort, and it was performed in Charlie Rossiter's Unity. Charlie Rossiter had a reading series in the Unity Temple in
Oak Park.
Oak Park, right, and that's where I read it. That has been that was a pretty powerful poem. It's really a poem decrying the material value that we have placed around ourselves at the same time that we drop bombs on backward countries in trying to inflict our will upon other nations. And that's, as a matter of fact, that was then picked up by a record company in Tennessee, and they recorded it, and as a matter of fact, they just re-released it a couple of weeks ago, so it sticks around.
Well, I appreciate you letting me able to play it, and we also have, and I have some, I need to get this up on the website, of your Controlled by Ghosts CD that I'm going to get up on the website for sale. I'll get it up in the next week. The world is starting to open up a little bit, so.
By the way, let me tell people also that if they're interested in getting any of my other books, they should go to my website, which is Jared Smith. I'm sorry, it's www.jaredsmith.info, info.
Thanks for listening, Terry.
My best to you all.
JaredSmith.info.
My
Uh,
best to you.
okay.
Yeah.
Jared, I'm gonna take you off screen, and thank you so much for this. It was entertaining and informative. I learned a lot. You gave me a hell of a lot to think about it, and I've been trying more and more to analyze this creative process, and I'm not the world's smartest tool in the shed, and I'm not the world's greatest philosopher, but
I think you're a pretty darn sharp tool, Dave. And if part of it, what I said, confuses you, it's because I'm talking off the top of my head and I compare things like a textbook, and I probably got a bunch wrong. But
well, thanks for dumbing down.
like Walt Whitman said, do I contradict myself? Very well, I contradict myself. I contain multitudes.
Well, thanks for simplifying it all for me.
Thank you, Dave.
And
Thank you all.
this will be up on Facebook Live. It'll be on Dave Getchick's page. It'll be on a whole bunch of other. I put it all over Facebook. People are probably going to be yelling at us because I put it in so many places in Facebook. And it should be on the Jared Smith page. So anybody who wants to go and watch this from the very beginning and wants to see the whole thing, they could just go to one of our pages and see it. And I'm gonna put on Jared's CD. And thanks for being on, Jared, and everybody
And
else.
you said it would be on YouTube at some point too, didn't you?
I'll get it on YouTube at some point.
Okay.
That's a long process.
Yes.
It takes me days to upload one of the shows onto Facebook. And if my phone goes down at any time, it kills it. So yeah, it'll be up on Facebook eventually, months from now.
Thank you.
I will give you a call during the week, and I'll let you know how we did on the show and how many people watched, and hang on, everybody online, because I'm going to put Jared's CD on, and I'm kicking you off. I'm kicking you up here, and I'm saying, okay, bye, Jared, and I'm turning your sound off. Bye. Okay, Jared's sound is off, so we can't hear him anymore, even if he wants to listen. Okay, the video feed went out for a second because somebody had to interfere with what was going on in the show. But we're back now, and sorry for that little respite there. Hey Lydia, how are you? Thanks for being back tonight. You missed a great interview with Jared Smith, but come back on the 8th also. We're going to have more Zooming with the Buddha. So we're going to have several poets online, and we're going to be discussing poetry and reading and what inspires us and what makes a poet, and who knows what we're going to be talking about. Maybe even some poetry legal issues, but we'll know what is going on. Yes, I mean, I love Jared's voice too. Jared has one of the best voices in all of poetry, and we're going to hear more of Jared in just a second when I put on his CD. But we are going to have Zooming with the Buddha next Monday. One of the 2 Mondays after that, we're probably going to be playing the Puddin'head Collage Press Bloomsday celebration. We have Bloomsday in Chicago online this time. So we're going to be doing Bloomsday in Chicago online. So we're going to be playing that over Facebook Live. And if you've never seen our Bloomsday in Chicago, we're able to take the whole Bloomsday novel and compress it into a little bit more thing. Yes, Wilda, I should still be live here. There's no reason why we shouldn't be still live here. We just had a burp for about a minute there, where we went offline. So we should be back online now, and I think I see myself online. And thanks, Ray, for coming on. Next week, Zooming with the Buddha. The week after that, we are going to have Bloomsday. Hopefully, we're going to have Jeff Helgeson talking about production a little bit. Bloomsday this year is going to be on YouTube, but I'm going to run the YouTube through Facebook Live just like I run the Zoom through Facebook Live. And right now, we're going to put on Jared Smith's CD, 7 minutes before the bombs drop. If I wasn't from Cicero, I'd be able to talk a little bit better. I'm blaming my D's and Dems and don'ts and stuff like that, Dems and stuff like that on my Cicero upbringing. So I'm trying to improve that. I no longer say library. Now I at least say library. Whatever I say. Anyways, I'm going to play this for you guys. And this is by Jared Smith. It's called 7 Minutes Before the Bombs Drop. No, we don't. We want to cancel this. We want to end this. Okay. And meeting for all. Yes, we're ending the meeting for everybody. Okay. So we should have Jared Smith playing here in a second. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the CD called 7 Minutes.
Old Edmund Newstart climbed up to the top of Mayberry Hill, and leaning back against a firm boulder, looked down over the city and counted the lights. There's 1 and 2 and, well, a whole lot more than there were people living there when I was younger, he said, and tilted his head back so that the moon fell over his lips. And I guess that most of them living there now don't have what I have. I own this hill, he said. I own this hill, and what else? And what do any of them own? And his hand reached out until it touched a dry stalk, and he pulled it from the sand and sucked it into his mouth, and he closed his eyes and smiled. Out of all the fear of grabbing an acre of land and the drinking times with Jim and the other bankers, well, they're gone now, but after all, someone had to live, and together we lived it well. And maybe better than any one man alone might live, but I've got the money to buy another pair of shoes to climb this hill. No better than what I had, but just as good. I wonder, old friend Moon, how do you fly without replacing wings? And he answered himself, you don't need wings on Mayberry Hill. Says the name of God will perish. Today, we have finished the Human Genome Project. From the twisted spiral of our days, we have labeled life itself. untwined it to banish and recreate our fears. We have tied it all into a paycheck that sends our children to college. Or have ignored it all and turned our eyes to entertainment, so that our lives are filled with the canned laughter and starvation, or are filled with tightly wound springs we cannot see, that propel us to levels where we can leave the city at least once a year, and walk among the mountains or sail on starlit seas sometimes for a week. It is raining in southern Illinois, and fishermen slouch the muddy banks of swollen streams, not because this is the place to come for trophy fish or for vacations that will be remembered, but because so much of the country, so much of where the grass still grows high, is filled now with tar-papered shacks and hanging walls, with doors that open darkly into nothing that can be seen, through which these men come in need of food in the waters, and in the evening when the big fish dimple the stars of night, come from their despair, which is so far from the double helix we speak of in our universities. What matters it then if we know the name of the face of God itself, but cannot recognize its face in the cold cliffs of our minds? I have known the names of constellations our city dwellers have never seen, and been terrified spinning beneath them on the desert floor, while I Love Lucy filled the mind of our best paid and our most forgotten. And it means nothing now. I have forgotten the helix and the name of the man who found it and was written in our books, even as it splits apart and searches for itself in the city lights where stars cannot be seen. What is life when we cannot reach out and feel our skin against the cold stone of night and find the warmth we do not find within ourselves? What is it that fills these sagging shacks in southern Illinois, or Arkansas, or Colorado, rising up into the clear, cold skies that stand above our laboratories and naming games, that has nothing to do with haste or quick response, but echoes with the soft flow of waters running inevitably to sea? What is it makes us turn our deepest discoveries to laughter caught on tape? Thank God I have forgotten the name. Only this, I have forgotten the name. On Mr. Peabody's estate. You can't stop life. I've sat beside this willow for 10 years of evenings, casting my lures into the water beyond its shadow, while its green curtains hung down, hiding the termite rot eating its heart, and have watched the other fishermen come and go, suits, or more often long hair and loose-knit shirts and jeans, neither kind of dress being better and neither kind of dress right for the world they enter. This tree spreading shade that drew the large bass in evening, that drew the fishermen, but it was struck down by strong winds 6 months ago and rolled out the grubs at its heart exposed to sun and dying, the termites too moving on to other challenges. It was winter when I found it, and it was sad to see it go, bare skeleton into the lake, its lower branches still holding it above the waterline, but dead. And now, in summer, oh, it is easy to be wrong, because it grows, its leaves leaning up now, not down, but toward the sun. You cannot stop life, not even when you strike its heart, not even when you eat its heart. But what is it based on? What hope fills the green, green leaves as its dead heart sinks into the shoreline? What moments and what generation of insects and what fishermen will steal those shadows now that I have gone cold? There are fences now rising up along the lake. 11 years is a long time in the life of an aquatic animal, but they still keep one shore open where the willow lies and its leaves are green in passing. And I visit it at times to sit and look upon the waters that the men on the other side can stock with bass, because they do not fence at all. They can't fence at all. And tonight, I watch a young boy of maybe 10 sweating and casting his line into the shadows. I would smile and offer him advice. Instead, I smile and walk on down the path. My own son chooses not to fish, but has other things. He will not read these words, though he loves to read and reads well. And I will send him to college next year, wherever he should want to go. My wife has polished her wedding ring and reset the stone. She will not fish with me. I walk on down the path, turn a corner for discretion, and hiss into the bushes, marking my own willow tree, which means nothing in the end. You cannot stop life, nor see the termites eating away within the heart of Mr. Peabody's estate. My wife does not think of sex as I do, nor roll in the grass, nor ever has. My wife does not make money as I do. I am a money machine with a rusting card. My son does not like to fish and will not walk with his old man. He has the internet. My daughter rides horses and plays viola. She chases younger men. I walk and watch the sunsets and see the fish dimple their universe in evening. My wife believes in having fun, and I don't remember how. On Mr. Peabody's estate, where they have begun to raise the fences up. In memory of Strain. For a year after John Strain died, his family left his house unsold in Weed, and we got our courage up going by as we did each evening through the field, our arms about each other's waists, wondering what it would be like to wait as ripening seeds behind the cutlery for your lover to come home tired and alone at the end of the day. A child wants to grow, even if wanting to believe doesn't make it so. And so it was one weekend we met there, whether from lust or on a dare, to climb through the kitchen window, stumble to the parquet floor, and hold each other by the hand in our uncertainty. In truth, right then there wasn't much to see. We went from room to room, afraid to climb the stairs to open closets, but we did, and talk as loudly as if this house were made, well, for ghosts and nothing else but us. So that when we had sex quickly, and we did, it would seem that we were alone more than enough, and in leaving we would grow, in believing what we feared did not make it so. Except in raising that dust across those floors, in having laid our bodies sweat upon those boards in first hunger, we were unsure that the man who died there might not still live in the patterns of leaves shivering their lives upon the walls, or a light quick dancing, perhaps the sun off a distant car's chrome passing on a dusty road. How, not knowing then, we knew that around us an unbearable brightness flew, that in its separation from our bones had no basis, no majesty of being, but mechanical self alone. There, in that twining light, built only of light and shadows and air, we felt an iron scaffolding of fear and the promise of broken time welded into the bones of night. As if to be ourselves was in fact to hear more than either of us could bear, through lives neither planned nor felt, except in the mad moments of belief, that what we carried in our finest moments of grief was in fact the pelt of some great animal blanketing the universe with its pungent smell, and in its largeness being what we saw as small. Perhaps that is why, as we left, we moved so much more slowly than we went in, caught winding our way to the foundations laid by Strain for his garage, now fading whether he crept in. And I buried my hands in the shattered masonry, not in memory or any cheap respect for what was paid, nor in guilt for any missing moments, but in sharing of that distant civilization that leaves a man with only what he makes and locks him in, spinning beyond our words into his walls. Ode to a Goose. You goose. I was walking that way, it's true, and too quickly almost, my fishing rod in hand, but something caused me to look up in time and see your nest just steps ahead of me along the deer path in the woods, and you on the far side stepping back from me, head turned over your shoulder so I could watch your eyes, your open mouth hissing despair at my speed. You goose, can't know the horror I felt in my heart, whether at my almost going too far or at the pain in your eyes as we both looked at your eggs huddled there, each knowing as they lay in the neat earth circle you had made them, the circle you had built with the clay of your wings and had sown with the wind of your feathers and had sat upon after life had taken you cruelly, as we both looked at them and thought each in our way how they would be destroyed in their helplessness by some man or by some other animal while they sought for warmth. You can't know why my turning away so quickly was not from fear, was not because you hissed so ferociously, but because I know better than you that it is the universe lying there, that your spirit is as deep as the sun and as fragile as an eggshell. You don't understand me, Goose. There are things in any man he cannot admit even to himself or understand. I am the wind behind the sunset as evening drops down upon your lake, and move across your feathers so swiftly that we are gone almost before we have seen each other. And what I have left inside of you is of the earth and of the night, It is reflected back upon me in your eyes, and what you have left in me is the distance between us and the desolation of the moon on your waters, the white round sun waiting beyond the shoulders of our earth. You do not understand, you goose, that your reprimand is the same distancing my wife uses when I try to bring my latest battles to my own home. When I try to tell my children they also will find stones scattered on hidden beaches even as I have, and will not be able to lift those stones because of caring any more than I have, or will lift those stones from the water only to see their colors pass into memory as they dry in their hands like stone. And my wife will only smile sadly and move away, drawing them with her, for she sees these stones as nurturing and sees that I am the wind, and that something in me pulls northward as the days grow short, that something howls loudly above the clouds when they are tinted silver, and shakes the leaves of the trees towering above us, something that is cold and distant and cannot be seen. But she does not know that it would hurt no one if it had the chance. Before I start reading, I want to mention a little blurb I pulled off Associated Press this morning. And I'm quoting this. In the strategy, Pentagon officials are calling shock and awe. U.S. forces plan to drop 10 times the bombs in the opening days of the air campaign in Iraq than they did in the first Persian Gulf War. 10 times for shock and awe. 7 minutes before the bombs drop, everyone still has names. Sand is grating against my eyes when the wind blows, striking counterpoint to the dry coughs of my son beyond the wall. There is no medicine that will help this, I think, but music is playing on a radio down the street. Everyone I know will be gathering there. We will barter for what we need, trade scraggly chickens or dates for shoes, trade shoes for drinking water before the sun gets high. I will seek medicine among my friends. 7 minutes before the bombs drop, we are sitting in the dim lights of a church reading poetry, talking with words meant for little animals we might keep tethered or lock into our kitchens so that they will not soil the rugs while we sleep. Between the words, though, we are talking of other things, of bartering whether we will wear chains about our necks or will make it into old age if one keeps ourselves. And we are reflecting on the words of other solitary thinkers who talk of war while drinking cognac in bomb shelters in the Blitz. 7 minutes before the bombs drop, we are crying, running, our bladders filled, our muscles quickening as never before in Kansas, and we thump our open hands down
sit with my wife and children around the dinner table. We will light candles as the centerpiece, and we will drink wine. I will turn the CD player on low and listen to the ancient songs, the songs that are no longer written, and will cry. Yes, I'm going to go there down the highway in my 96 Lumina, faster than I should, outside the law, but in my Lumina. That's okay. You come too. You come too. There is no guilt in holding on to each other in our despair through the miles. There is no guilt unless we ever re-elect the darkness that envelops us. We are the light, if only by the choice of fate and mystery of words. Thank you.
She wakes in the night, crying, "Who came through the door?" "No one," I say. "I have been here." You are hearing footsteps on the floor above us. She babbles something about money, 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 and rolls off into sleep. I count the footsteps and listen to the wind roll by my window. The air is thick with sirens, drawing me in their northward flight through winter. At last, I too rise, too certain that some fast and not too silent momentum has caught in the marrow of my bones, hurling me at a speed beyond direction, so that my impressions and hours are meaningless, empty bottles set down empty before a barn, and shattering one by one the targets of a boy aiming his father's rifle the first time. And like then, or like the evening of that day, I walk into the living room by myself, and I sit and take a slow drink from a glass of milk, looking out upon a brittle landscape of winter. And like then, although the sun is about to rise, unlike then, I look through a frozen web of ice crystals, thinking, although the strangers I live with now are much less strangers than then, it is something I have seldom seen, and it is startlingly solid, much more so than the news. How everything outside that window is more distant than this web. And I think, just as I did then, this is something which must be shared, so that I turn toward the other rooms of the house, although the house is new, and once again I turn back, because it is something which cannot be said in words. There are moments when you too look out the windows and turn away. And I sit back, looking out through the ice tracks, spreading out across our windows, the iron
Okay, we have some
straight
technical problems
tracks
here.
running forever across space throughout their lengths, crossed at regular and immediate intervals by shorter iron lengths, parallel and spaceless tracks of timelessness, outward until the lines blur while maintaining their direction. And I lean forward, as each of you has done, while the moon fills each faultless line, and the train, I think of the train even now, lurching its heavy metal sides down canyons toward the city, where I carry what I can in a thick black case to the office where I, like you, have earned my keep. For like you, I step back from the automation at times when the sun is dipping low and sweeping from the day, and walk along those tracks, kicking my feet among the dark ties and loose rubble which contain our civilization, through the small fields which arise lost buildings falling with their captured men.
Okay, we're having technical difficulties with our CD player.
Memories upon the earth of their immediate path, past the
We have 2 tracks left. Hi Wayne, hi Eric. We're having some technical problems here. I'm trying to skip this track and it's freezing up on me. So I think we might have to get radical here. Okay, I'm to the next track. Come on, play. Play. I lost some sound here. Ladies and gentlemen, I having some weird problems here. So I think that might be our show for tonight. Tomorrow, next Monday, we're going to have Zooming with the Buddha. So come on back next week. We'll be back here next Monday. And we'll be back here with a Bloomsday show the Monday after that or the Monday after that. And someday I will figure out how to do a regular studio. And yeah, Wayne, I went to an earlier track and it's not even working anymore. Hi Wayne. Hi Wayne, how are you? Let's go one more time. Because track number 9 is one of the coolest tracks. Okay, I'm not sure the microphone is on this thing. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, that's gonna be the show for tonight. Thanks for coming. Thanks for listening. Zoom in with the Buddha on June 8th. On June 15th or 22nd, we're going to have a rebroadcast of our Bloomsday show. And thanks for coming, everybody. And this was pretty fun. And I drank almost all glass of wine. And thanks for watching, Hugh Schwartzberg. Thanks for watching, Wayne Ellen Jones. Wish you got to get her earlier. But this was an amazing interview. You should take a look at it after I get off the air, because we're going to leave it up and we'll have it on Facebook eventually. Wilda, we're wonderful. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you soon. And we got to get you zooming on this program soon. Hope everything's okay and hope everybody's safe out there. And the world is doing very interesting things right now. I'm working pretty hard with Puddin'head. We're selling some more books, and we're going to be doing more and more exciting stuff down the road. And thanks for listening. I'm going to go call my mommy. Have a good night, everybody, and peace to you too, Wayne. And bye-bye, everybody.